A quiet trip to the grocery store becomes a nightmare when James Carter, a beloved retired teacher, is brutally assaulted by two racist cops. Accused of a crime he didn't commit, James finds himself at the center of an injustice he thought the world had left behind. As the assault leaves him physically and emotionally shattered, the community stands divided, some questioning the truth, others turning a blind eye. But just as hope seems lost, an unexpected figure emerges to challenge the lies, expose the corruption, and fight for James's dignity. In a race against time, secrets are uncovered, alliances are tested, and a plan for revenge takes shape. Justice hangs in the balance, and the consequences of failure could destroy not just one life, but an entire legacy. Shattered Legacy, a family's fight for justice is a powerful tale of resilience and redemption, packed with suspense, explosive revelations, and a fight against all odds. Will justice prevail, or will the truth be silenced forever? Based on a true story. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. James Carter stepped out of his car, the afternoon sun gleaming off the windshield as he grabbed his reusable grocery bags. The weekly trip to the grocery store was his quiet routine, a time to wander the aisles, exchange pleasantries with familiar faces, and enjoy a semblance of normalcy in his retirement. At 70, James carried himself with a quiet dignity. A retired high school teacher, he was known for his warm smile and calming presence, qualities that had earned him the respect of generations of students. The grocery store's parking lot buzzed with life, shoppers unloading their carts, children darting around their parents, and the faint hum of an approaching ice cream truck in the distance. James adjusted his glasses, smiled at a young couple who nodded in greeting, and made his way toward the store entrance. As James paused to straighten his tie, a habit ingrained from years of standing at a chalkboard, a sharp voice broke through the ambient noise. "Hey! You there!" He turned to see a man in a crisp store uniform, flanked by two security officers who weren't dressed like mall cops. They were real police officers. James frowned but kept his composure. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice calm but wary. "You've been reported for suspicious behavior," the manager said curtly, his tone carrying an edge of authority. James blinked. "Suspicious behavior? I just arrived." "You must have the wrong person." One of the officers stepped forward, his hand already hovering near his baton. "We've had complaints about shoplifting in the area. You match the description." James's heart sank. The words were painfully familiar, a refrain he'd heard in stories from friends and former students. This wasn't about shoplifting, this was about him being a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I haven't even entered the store yet," James replied evenly, gripping his grocery bags tighter. "You can check your cameras." "I haven't taken anything." The manager's eyes narrowed. "We'll need to search your car, just to be sure. Compliance will make this easier." The situation was escalating far too quickly. A crowd had started to gather, shoppers craning their necks to see what was happening. Some whispered to each other, others simply stared. James's chest tightened. "I'm not agreeing to anything without a valid reason," he said, his voice firmer now. That was the trigger. The officer closest to him stepped forward, barking, "Don't get smart with us." Before James could react, the officer grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Pain shot through his shoulder. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." James gasped, struggling to remain upright. The second officer moved in, shoving James against the side of his car. The impact knocked the glasses from his face, sending them clattering to the ground. A sharp blow to his ribs followed, and James crumpled under the weight of the two officers. "Enough," someone from the crowd shouted, but no one stepped in. The scene unfolded like a nightmare. The officers wrestled James to the pavement, cuffing his hands behind his back as he struggled to catch his breath. His knees scraped against the asphalt, blood seeping through the fabric of his slacks. "Please," James managed, his voice breaking. "This is a mistake." The officers ignored him, one of them sneering as he yanked James to his feet. "Teach him a lesson," the manager muttered, turning away as if the incident no longer concerned him. James scanned the crowd, his vision blurred without his glasses. He caught the eye of a woman holding her young child. She looked away quickly, clutching her son to her chest. Defeated, James hung his head as they dragged him toward the squad car. The ache in his ribs and wrists was nothing compared to the humiliation coursing through him. As he was shoved into the back seat, James felt the weight of his 70 years pressing down on him. The world outside seemed to blur, the faces of the onlookers melting into a haze of indifference. In the distance, the faint sound of a phone ringing reached his ears, a bystander, perhaps, calling for help. But the despair in James's chest told him it wouldn't matter. The door slammed shut, trapping him inside. And somewhere, far away, his son's phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Marcus Carter slammed his phone onto the table, the message from a family friend still lighting up the screen. "James is in custody. They say he was shoplifting. You need to get here now." His heart pounded as he grabbed his keys. Marcus was no stranger to injustice, but this? His father, a retired teacher, a man who lived by principles of honesty and dignity, accused of theft? The absurdity made Marcus's stomach churn with anger. "Stay calm," he muttered to himself as he sped toward the police station. His father needed him level-headed, not blinded by rage. When Marcus arrived, the station's fluorescent lights buzzed harshly overhead, adding to the oppressive atmosphere. He approached the front desk, his sharp suit and commanding presence catching the attention of the officers lounging nearby. "I'm here for James Carter," he said, his voice firm. The desk officer barely looked up. "And you are?" "His son," Marcus replied. "And his attorney." The officer snorted, leaning back in his chair. "You can wait in the lobby. We're processing him now." "Processing?" Marcus clenched his fists at his sides. His father wasn't a criminal, and this wasn't some bureaucratic formality. This was a humiliation, plain and simple. "Let me make myself clear," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a steely tone. "I want to see my father. Now." The officer's smirk faltered as Marcus held his gaze. With a huff, he motioned for another officer to escort Marcus to the holding area. In the dimly lit cell, James sat on a cold bench, his shoulders hunched. The scrape on his forehead stood out sharply against his dark skin, and his once pristine shirt was rumpled and stained with a faint streak of blood. "Dad," Marcus called softly. James looked up, relief flooding his face. "Marcus." Marcus moved quickly to his father's side, kneeling before him. "Are you okay?" "Did they?" He stopped, his jaw tightening as he noticed the bruises forming along his father's wrists. "I'll be fine," James said, though his voice wavered. "It's not the first time someone's tried to put me in my place." The weight of that statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "They accused me of shoplifting," James continued. "Didn't even ask questions. Just assumed." Marcus gritted his teeth. "They're not going to get away with this." Back in the lobby, the Carter family began to arrive. James's younger sister, Denise, walked in first, her face a mix of fury and worry. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "Where's the store manager? The cops? Someone's going to answer for this." "They'll answer," Marcus assured her. James's wife, Evelyn, entered next, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "I told him to stop going there," she whispered to Marcus. "I told him it wasn't safe." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This isn't his fault. It's theirs." Denise crossed her arms. "This town has always been like this. It's about time someone did something." Someone will, Marcus said, his voice low. Me. That evening, Marcus pored over every detail he could find. Eyewitness accounts trickled in from family friends, and a few brave bystanders reached out to confirm what James had told him. There was no theft, just an unfounded accusation followed by excessive force. Then came the first crack in the story. A local store employee, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the manager had been under pressure to explain a series of inventory discrepancies. False accusations had been used before, usually targeting customers of color. Marcus's pen hovered over his notepad. This wasn't just a mistake or an overreaction. It was systemic, calculated. As midnight approached, Evelyn brought Marcus a cup of coffee. "You've been at this for hours," she said softly. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples. "I can't let this slide, Mom. It's not just about Dad. It's about all the people they've done this to." Evelyn placed a hand on his. "Just, be careful. You know how this town works." Marcus met her gaze, the fire in his eyes unmistakable. "Careful isn't going to get justice." Marcus Carter stood outside the grocery store the next morning, his jaw tight as he watched the automatic doors slide open and close. The early hour hadn't deterred shoppers, the parking lot was already bustling with cars and chatter. For most people, this was just another Saturday. But for Marcus, it was the scene of a crime, one that had left his father battered and humiliated. He adjusted his tie, steeling himself, and strode through the entrance. Inside, the manager's office loomed at the back of the store. Marcus approached the front counter, locking eyes with a cashier who visibly tensed. "I need to speak with the manager," Marcus said, his tone clipped. The cashier hesitated but eventually nodded. Moments later, the manager, a stout man with a perpetually furrowed brow, appeared. His name tag read Jameson. "Can I help you?" Jameson asked, his tone brusque. "You certainly can," Marcus replied, slipping a business card onto the counter. "I'm Marcus Carter, legal counsel for James Carter. You might remember him." Jameson's face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. "I don't discuss ongoing investigations. You'll have to take it up with the police." "Oh, don't worry. I already have," Marcus said, his voice razor sharp. "But I thought you might want the opportunity to clarify why your staff called the police in the first place. Perhaps you'd like to explain why a man who hadn't even entered the store was accused of shoplifting." Jameson's eyes darted around the store. A few curious shoppers lingered nearby, pretending to browse. "I'm not obligated to explain anything to you," he said, his voice dropping. Marcus leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "Let me make myself clear. I'm not here to ask for your cooperation, I'm here to expose the truth. And if that truth paints you and this store in a bad light, so be it." The tension was palpable. Jameson's lip curled, but before he could respond, Marcus turned on his heel and walked out. Back in his office later that day, Marcus sifted through piles of notes, police reports, and witness statements. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. A clear pattern emerged: the store had a history of targeting black customers with baseless accusations, often using the police as enforcers. But why? The answer came from an unexpected source. A knock at Marcus's door revealed a young man, no older than 20, nervously clutching his phone. "My name's Darnell," the man said, his voice shaky. "I work at the store. I think I can help." Marcus motioned for him to sit. Darnell hesitated before speaking. "The manager, Jameson, he's been blaming thefts on customers for months. Especially people of color. But it's not just about shoplifting." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. Darnell swallowed hard. "There's money missing, inventory too. It's not the customers. It's him." Jameson's been covering for himself by making false accusations. Your dad, he didn't do anything wrong. He just got in the way. Marcus's pen paused mid-sentence. Are you willing to testify to this? Darnell hesitated, his fear evident. I don't know. If Jameson finds out I told you. I'll protect you, Marcus assured him. But I need your help. My father isn't the only one who's suffered because of this. Darnell nodded reluctantly. Okay. I'll do it. Armed with this new information, Marcus returned to the precinct that evening. He demanded a meeting with the precinct captain, a gruff man named Whitaker who clearly resented being pulled from his dinner. This better be good, Whitaker grumbled. Oh, it is, Marcus said, placing a folder on the desk. Inside, you'll find evidence that Officer Simmons has a history of racially motivated misconduct. Complaints swept under the rug, excessive force reports ignored, it's all there. Whitaker's jaw tightened. What are you trying to prove, Carter? I'm proving that Simmons isn't just a bad cop, he's part of a system that protects bad cops. And I'm not stopping until every single one of you is held accountable. Whitaker leaned back, his expression unreadable. You've made your point. Now get out of my office. Marcus stood, his glare unwavering. This isn't over. Later that night, Marcus pored over security footage provided by a sympathetic store employee. The grainy black and white video showed James standing by his car, moments before the cops arrived. It was clear, James hadn't entered the store, let alone stolen anything. Then came the twist. The footage also captured Jameson speaking with Simmons and Cole minutes before the confrontation. Their gestures and expressions were unmistakable, they were planning something. Marcus's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a case of racial profiling. It was premeditated. The following day, Marcus held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashing as he spoke. My father, James Carter, was the victim of a coordinated assault, an assault that goes beyond mere negligence, Marcus announced. Today, I am filing a civil suit against the grocery store and the officers involved. This case isn't just about one man, it's about holding accountable a system that perpetuates injustice. As the crowd buzzed with questions, Marcus stepped down, his resolve stronger than ever. He wasn't just fighting for his father anymore, he was fighting for everyone who had ever been silenced. The dim glow of Marcus Carter's desk lamp illuminated the growing pile of evidence spread across his desk. Notes from interviews, witness testimonies, and pages of Officer Simmons's disciplinary record painted a damning picture. The walls of his home office were beginning to feel like the walls of a courtroom, one he would build brick by brick to bring his father justice. Marcus's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Denise. Marcus, her voice trembled. Dad's not doing well. He's been so quiet, it's like he's just given up. Marcus exhaled sharply, guilt washing over him. He had been so focused on building the case that he hadn't taken the time to reassure his father. I'll come by tomorrow morning, he promised. But I need you to trust me. I'm going to fix this. As he hung up, his resolve hardened. The people responsible for his father's pain weren't just going to face justice, they were going to feel it. The next morning, Marcus parked outside the grocery store again. He wasn't there for the manager this time. Instead, he approached a young cashier he had noticed the day before. She looked up nervously as he approached. Hi, Marcus began, keeping his voice soft. I'm Marcus Carter. I think you might have seen what happened to my father the other day. The cashier fidgeted, glancing toward the manager's office. I don't want any trouble. Neither do I, Marcus replied, sliding his card across the counter. But trouble has a way of finding us, doesn't it? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. I saw the manager talking to the cops before your dad even got here. They looked suspicious. I thought something was off, but I didn't say anything. Do you know what they were discussing? Marcus asked, his pen poised. The cashier shook her head. No, but the cameras in the parking lot probably caught it. Marcus's eyes lit up. This was the confirmation he needed. Back in his office, Marcus reviewed the security footage Darnell had sent him earlier. For hours, he replayed the clip of Jameson speaking with officers Simmons and Cole. The grainy audio was unintelligible, but their body language told a story. Marcus froze the frame on Jameson handing a small envelope to Simmons. "What's in the envelope?" he muttered to himself. As Marcus leaned back, his mind raced. The connection between the store and the cops was clearer now. But the envelope hinted at something deeper, something bigger. His thoughts were interrupted by another buzz of his phone. This time, it was an anonymous tip sent through his law office's website. The message was short but explosive. Check Simmons's connection to the store. It's not just racism, it's money. Marcus's next step brought him to City Hall, where public records were kept. After hours of searching, he found what he was looking for, a series of payments made by Jameson to Simmons and Cole over the past year. The description for the payments was vague, consulting fees, but Marcus wasn't fooled. This wasn't just a case of racial profiling. The store manager and the officers were running a scheme. They used false accusations and intimidation tactics to deflect attention from the store's internal thefts, profiting in the process. That evening, Marcus visited his parents' house. James sat quietly in his favorite armchair, staring out the window. Marcus placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, I know you're tired. But I need you to stay strong. We're getting close to the truth." James turned, his eyes weary. "You don't understand, son. Even if you win, what changes? They'll just find another way to tear us down." "No, they won't," Marcus said firmly. "Not this time." James nodded slowly, but his doubt lingered. The following morning, Marcus held another meeting with Darnell. This time, the young employee handed over copies of internal store memos. One memo in particular stood out, a policy directive urging employees to report suspicious behavior, specifically regarding certain customer demographics. "Unbelievable," Marcus muttered as he scanned the page. "It gets worse," Darnell said. The memo was written by Jameson himself, but the district office approved it. "This goes all the way to the top." Marcus's jaw tightened. The store's corporate leadership had sanctioned racial profiling to protect their bottom line. Later that day, Marcus returned to the precinct, armed with his growing arsenal of evidence. This time, he wasn't there to speak with the captain, he was there to confront Officer Simmons directly. The officer's smug expression faltered when Marcus entered the interrogation room. "I thought you'd want to see this," Marcus said, placing a stack of documents on the table. Simmons glanced at the papers, his face paling as he recognized the payment records. "I don't know what you're talking about," Simmons stammered. "Oh, I think you do," Marcus replied. "Those consulting fees? That envelope in the footage? It's all coming out, Simmons. You can either cooperate, or you can go down with the rest of them." Simmons's lips pressed into a thin line, but the fear in his eyes was undeniable. As Marcus left the precinct, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. "Careful, Carter. You're getting too close." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The system wasn't going to go down without a fight. The morning air was thick with tension as Marcus Carter stood outside the courthouse steps, a folder of evidence in one hand and his phone in the other. His phone buzzed incessantly, reporters, activists, even former colleagues reaching out to comment on the case he had meticulously built. But Marcus wasn't here for the press. Today was about justice. The threat from the night before lingered in his mind, but Marcus knew backing down wasn't an option. His father's dignity, and the dignity of everyone who had been wrongfully targeted, depended on his next move. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Marcus entered the courtroom, his father and family sitting in the first row, their presence a steady source of strength. James looked better today, less weary, more focused. But the bruises on his wrists were a haunting reminder of why they were here. At the defense table sat the grocery store manager, Jameson, flanked by two lawyers whose expensive suits screamed intimidation. In the gallery, officers Simmons and Cole sat stiffly, their expressions betraying nervousness. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Marcus rose to present his case. For far too long, people like my father, honest, hard-working individuals, have been targeted, humiliated, and silenced, Marcus began, his voice steady but impassioned. But today, we're here to expose the truth. He handed the judge a copy of the store's internal memo, highlighting its racially discriminatory policies. This directive, approved by management, encouraged employees to racially profile customers, leading to false accusations and unwarranted confrontations. Gasps rippled through the gallery as Marcus turned to the jury, his gaze piercing. But this case isn't just about policy. It's about premeditated abuse. Evidence will show that the store manager, Jameson, worked in tandem with officers Simmons and Cole to deflect attention from internal theft and protect their profits. He clicked a remote, and the courtroom lights dimmed. On the screen, grainy footage from the parking lot played, showing Jameson slipping the envelope to Simmons moments before the assault. Payoffs disguised as consulting fees, Marcus explained. This wasn't policing, it was a partnership in corruption. Jameson's lawyers scrambled to object, but the judge silenced them, gesturing for Marcus to continue. As the trial unfolded, witnesses stepped forward, their testimonies painting a picture of systemic injustice. Darnell, the young employee, confirmed the store's policy and described the atmosphere of fear among staff. "We were told to keep quiet," Darnell said, his voice trembling. "If we questioned the manager's decisions, we'd lose our jobs." The tipping point came when Marcus revealed another plot twist, Simmons's prior misconduct cases. These incidents, Marcus stated, displaying a chart of complaints, show a pattern of racially motivated behavior. Complaints were routinely dismissed or buried, allowing him to continue targeting innocent people like my father. The evidence was damning, and the jury's expressions betrayed their shock. During a recess, Marcus stepped outside to catch his breath. The weight of the case bore down on him, but the sight of his father standing nearby filled him with renewed determination. "You're doing good, son," James said softly. Marcus nodded, the fire in his eyes unwavering. "It's not over yet." The defense's attempts to refute the evidence crumbled under the weight of Marcus's preparation. By the time the closing arguments arrived, the courtroom was silent, all eyes on Marcus. "My father didn't just suffer physical harm that day," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "He suffered humiliation, fear, and the loss of faith in a system meant to protect him. And he's not alone. This case is about accountability, not just for my father, but for everyone who has been silenced by the abuse of power." As he returned to his seat, Marcus caught Jameson's expression. The smugness had vanished, replaced by fear. Later that evening, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty. Jameson, Simmons, and Cole were convicted of conspiracy, assault, and misconduct. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Marcus hugged his father tightly. "You did it," James whispered, tears in his eyes. "No, Dad," Marcus replied. "We did it." In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. The grocery store chain issued a public apology and overhauled its policies, while the precinct launched an internal investigation that resulted in the dismissal of multiple officers. James, though still recovering, walked taller than he had in weeks. As Marcus watched his father tend to his garden one sunny afternoon, he felt a sense of closure, but not complacency. The fight for justice was far from over, but for now, they had won a victory that mattered.